Trevor called me into his office at 4:30 on a Friday. I knew something was wrong when he didn't look up from his phone. "Jaclyn, your role is being eliminated as part of our restructuring. Security will walk you out," he said flatly. My stomach dropped. 5 years building this company, and he had no idea I owned 70% of it. I signed the termination papers quietly. "Let's do this properly," I whispered, already planning my appearance at next week's board meeting. He had no idea what was coming. I founded Horizon Tech 5 years ago with a revolutionary idea for secure cloud storage that could transform how companies protected their data. From day one, I made an unusual decision. I wanted to remain in the background, not out of shyness, but because I loved building products more than building my personal brand. "Are you sure about this, Jaclyn?" My friend Allison had asked when I first proposed my plan. As both my friend and the company's lawyer, she was the only person who knew all the details. "You'll own 70% of the company but work as a regular employee? People will take advantage." I was 34 then, with 10 years of experience watching brilliant innovators get pushed out of their own companies once investors decided they needed professional management. I'd seen too many founders lose control of their vision. "I want to focus on creating, not managing," I explained. "If the board and investors see me as just another employee, I can work directly on the product without politics. But I'll always hold the majority shares as protection." We structured it carefully. On paper, I was simply the head of product development. The company had a standard CEO originally, my college friend Patrick, who handled the public-facing work. The arrangement worked perfectly for 3 years. Our technology gained traction. We expanded to 50 employees, and I got to keep doing what I loved. Then Patrick announced he was leaving for family reasons, moving across the country to care for his ailing father. The board appointed Trevor as interim CEO 6 months ago. He came with impressive credentials from larger tech companies and initially seemed respectful of our culture. I first noticed the changes 3 months in. Trevor began making decisions without consulting the leadership team. He hired expensive consultants who knew nothing about our technology. The free-flowing communication that had been our hallmark disappeared, replaced by formal memos and restricted access to information. "He's creating silos," I complained to Allison over lunch 2 weeks before my firing. "People can't collaborate anymore." "There's something else," she said, lowering her voice. "Trevor's been asking for unusual access to our patent documentation and client contracts." I frowned. "Why would the CEO need to review those directly?" "That's what the legal team is for." "Exactly. And Jaclyn," she hesitated, "have you noticed that the original team members are disappearing?" She was right. In the past month, 3 longtime employees who knew me from the beginning had been let go. Each termination was explained as a restructuring necessity. But they were all people who understood my founding role. That evening, I stayed late reviewing personnel changes. What I discovered sent a chill through me. Every single person who knew I was the founder had either been terminated or reassigned to distant projects. The only exceptions were Allison, who was protected by attorney-client privilege, and myself. Trevor wasn't just restructuring. He was systematically erasing my history with the company. I printed the evidence and locked it in my desk drawer, planning to bring it to the next board meeting. But Trevor moved faster than I anticipated. The next morning, I found my security access downgraded. By Friday afternoon, I was sitting in his office being fired. What Trevor didn't realize was that I had built backdoor access into all our systems not for nefarious purposes, but because I occasionally coded late at night and needed to troubleshoot emergencies. Even without my employee access, I could still monitor what was happening. That night, after being escorted out, I logged in from home. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Trevor had scheduled an emergency board meeting for next Thursday. The agenda included a single item: vote on acquisition offer. He was going to sell my company. The weekend after being fired from my own company was surreal. I kept reaching for my work phone before remembering it had been confiscated. My apartment felt foreign, too quiet during what would normally be work hours. I'd never realized how completely Horizon had become my identity, until it was suddenly gone. Sunday morning, I called Allison. "Can you meet me? Somewhere private?" We met at a small cafe 20 miles outside Austin, far from our usual haunts. Allison looked worried when she arrived, sliding into the booth across from me. "Trevor's selling the company," I said without preamble. Her eyes widened. "What? To whom?" "Vortex Industries." I watched her face pale. Vortex was notorious for acquiring smaller tech companies, stripping their assets, and discarding the remains. "That makes no sense," Allison said. "We're profitable, growing, with technology years ahead of competitors. Why would the board even consider this? They might not know yet." "The meeting's scheduled for Thursday." I took a deep breath. "Allison, I accessed the system last night. Trevor's been shopping around our core patents separately from the company. He's already got buyers lined up for our most valuable intellectual property." "That's corporate theft," she whispered. "It gets worse. The acquisition price he's proposing to the board is $40 million. 40? Allison looked stunned. "We're worth at least $300 million. The secure storage platform alone is worth more than 40. "Exactly. And guess who owns a significant stake in a shell company connected to Vortex? Trevor," she concluded, connecting the dots. "He gets the company for pennies on the dollar, sells off the patents for a fortune, and walks away rich, while everyone else loses everything." My phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. "Jaclyn? It's Sarah from accounting." Her voice was hushed, anxious. "I'm sorry to call on a Sunday, but something's happening with the company finances." Sarah had been with Horizon since nearly the beginning. I trusted her completely. "What kind of something?" I asked, putting the call on speaker for Allison to hear. "Massive transfers to offshore accounts began Friday evening. Officially, they're consultant payments, but they're going to shell companies I can't trace. And Trevor's ordered us to restate our assets at 30% below actual value." My stomach twisted. "How much has been transferred?" "Almost $6 million so far. There's another $8 million queued for Monday morning." After hanging up, Allison and I sat in stunned silence. "He's draining the company before selling it," she finally said, creating a paper trail to justify the low valuation. My phone buzzed again with texts from confused employees. Nathan from engineering wanted to know why our main server access had been restricted. Tiffany from HR was being pressured to prepare severance packages for 20 more employees. Everyone was confused about the sudden changes and reaching out to me even though I'd been fired. That night, I couldn't sleep. Standing at my window overlooking downtown Austin, I watched the lights of the city and thought about the 50 families depending on Horizon for their livelihoods, the customers who trusted us with their data security, the investors who believed in our vision. Monday morning, I received an anonymous email from someone on the board. It contained the full details of Trevor's proposal. Vortex would acquire Horizon for $40 million. Trevor would stay on to manage the transition for a year with a $2 million retention bonus, and the board members would receive consulting agreements worth $100,000 each. What the board didn't know was that Trevor had already negotiated with Vortex's CEO to sell our core patents separately for $80 million once the acquisition was complete. He would get 30% of that sale personally, $24 million for destroying what we'd built. The betrayal was complete when I discovered who had helped Trevor orchestrate all of this. Marcus Whitfield, the venture capitalist who joined our board last year, was secretly a major investor in Vortex. He had placed Trevor specifically to facilitate this theft. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by printouts of damning evidence, and felt a cold fury replace my shock. They thought I was just another expendable employee. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. I picked up my phone and texted Allison. Time to show them who really owns Horizon. Monday afternoon, I turned my dining room into an intelligence center. 3 laptops, printouts of financial records, and a whiteboard where I mapped connections between Trevor, Marcus, and Vortex Industries. I needed irrefutable evidence before Thursday's board meeting. My first task was gathering information on Trevor's background. I called Jordan, an investigative journalist friend who owed me a favor. I need everything on Trevor Blackwell, especially his last 3 positions, I explained. 6 hours later, Jordan sent me a comprehensive file. The pattern was clear. Trevor had been hired by struggling companies, orchestrated their sale to larger entities at suspiciously low valuations, and walked away with generous consulting contracts afterward. In 2 cases, the acquiring companies had connections to Marcus Whitfield. This is their playbook, I told Allison when she arrived with takeout that evening. They target promising companies, install Trevor as a turnaround specialist, create artificial financial distress, then sell at a massive discount to their partners. We need access to Trevor's communications, Allison said. Without direct evidence of collusion, it's just circumstantial. This was where my technical background proved invaluable. While I'd been officially hired as head of product, I had designed Horizon's core infrastructure. I knew every backdoor in the system. I built an emergency access protocol. I explained as I typed complex commands into one of the laptops. In case of catastrophic system failure, authorized users can access a shadow copy of all company data. Is that legal? Allison asked nervously. Completely. It's documented in our security protocols that the board approved 3 years ago. They just didn't understand the technical details. After an hour, I was in. Every email, document, and message on our servers was accessible. I set up search parameters focusing on communications between Trevor and external entities in the past 6 months. What we found exceeded my worst fears. Trevor had been in contact with Marcus and Vortex's CEO since before he was even hired. Their plan had been in motion for nearly a year. They had identified Horizon as a target because our patent portfolio was vastly undervalued and could be stripped for parts. Look at this. I pointed to an email from Trevor to Marcus from just 3 days ago. Final preparations complete. Key personnel removed. Financial statements modified to show declining projections. Board presentation ready with urgent acquisition recommendation. After approval, we'll move quickly on the patent transfers as discussed. Allison looked ill. This is corporate fraud on a massive scale. And this, I pulled up another document, is the real valuation of our patent portfolio that Trevor commissioned but never shared with the board. $380 million, almost 10 times what he's selling the entire company for. We worked through the night, gathering and organizing evidence. By morning, we had a comprehensive file documenting the entire scheme, but I knew documents alone wouldn't be enough. I needed allies inside the company. I called Nathan from the engineering team, who I'd worked closely with for years. I need your help, but it could be risky, I warned him. After what happened to you, I'm already looking for another job, he replied. What do you need? Access to Trevor's calendar and meeting recordings for the past month. Nathan didn't ask questions. 2 hours later, he sent me access credentials for Trevor's private calendar and the audio recordings of his meetings, a feature of our conference room system that automatically archived all discussions for compliance purposes. The recordings were damning. In one, Trevor openly discussed with Marcus which patents to sell first after the acquisition. In another, he laughed about firing me, calling me just another tech drone who doesn't understand business. By Tuesday evening, I had assembled a small team of trusted employees. Nathan from engineering, Sarah from accounting, and Tiffany from HR, all working remotely, and off the official radar. Each provided critical pieces of information from their departments. Wednesday morning brought the most disturbing discovery yet. Sarah found evidence that Trevor had already begun transferring our proprietary code to Vortex, violating not just company policy but federal law regarding intellectual property. He's not even waiting for the board approval, I told Allison. He's already giving away our technology. As we prepared our case for the board meeting, I struggled with waves of self-doubt. Had my decision to remain anonymous as the founder created this vulnerability? If I had been more visible, would Trevor have even attempted this scheme? Don't blame yourself, Allison said, reading my expression. You wanted to create something meaningful without ego getting in the way. That's admirable. Not naive. But now 50 people might lose their jobs because I wanted to stay in the background. No, she corrected firmly. 50 people might lose their jobs because 2 men decided to commit fraud. This isn't on you, Jaclyn. But you're the only one who can stop it now. That night, I prepared my presentation for the board meeting with meticulous care. Every accusation was backed by multiple sources of evidence. The case against Trevor and Marcus was irrefutable. I was about to shut down my laptop when a new email arrived from David Wilson, our marketing director. I'd always had a good relationship with David, though we weren't particularly close. Jaclyn, we need to talk. His message read. I know what Trevor is doing. I have additional evidence. Can we meet tomorrow morning before the board meeting? I don't trust talking about this electronically. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near the office at 7 the next morning. As I finally went to bed, I felt a glimmer of hope. With David's help, our case would be even stronger. I had no idea I was walking into a trap. I arrived at the coffee shop at 6:45 Thursday morning, choosing a table with a clear view of the door. The place was busy with the pre-work crowd, providing enough background noise for a private conversation. David arrived precisely at 7, dressed more formally than usual in a crisp suit. He slid into the seat across from me, placing his laptop bag carefully on the chair beside him. Thanks for meeting me, he said, his voice low. Things at the office are chaotic. Trevor's been in closed-door meetings for 2 days straight. What evidence did you find? I asked, keeping my own voice quiet. David glanced around before pulling a flash drive from his pocket. Marketing was asked to prepare materials for a transition announcement scheduled for Friday. I found the real plans for after the acquisition. They're planning to lay off 80% of the staff immediately and move the remaining operations to Chicago. My heart sank. Most of our employees had families, mortgages. Austin's tech community was tight-knit. Mass layoffs would devastate dozens of households. Can I see? I reached for the flash drive. Not here, David said, pulling it back. There are some large files. Let's use my laptop. He opened his computer and inserted the drive, angling the screen so both of us could see. As files began loading, David asked an odd question. So where have you been working from? Your home? Something in his tone made me hesitate. Various places. Coffee shops, mostly. And who else is helping you? Allison, obviously. But who else from the company? The files were taking an unusually long time to load. I noticed David glancing at his watch repeatedly. Just gathering public information, I deflected. Why do you ask? A notification popped up on David's screen, a text message he quickly tried to hide. Is she there? Stall for 10 more min. In that moment, I realized David wasn't my ally. He was working with Trevor. I forgot I have a call scheduled, I said, standing abruptly. Email me those files? David's expression hardened as he realized his cover was blown. Jaclyn, don't be stupid. You can't win this. Trevor has the board, the investors, everything locked down. Take the severance package and walk away. What did he promise you? My job? I asked. Understanding dawning. Chief Technology Officer, he admitted without shame. Someone has to lead the transition. Even though 80% of your colleagues will lose their jobs? He shrugged. Business is business. Look, Trevor knows you've been gathering information. He knows about your backdoor access. They've been tracking your movements in the system. Cold fear washed over me. If they knew what I'd accessed. This meeting wasn't about sharing evidence, I said. It was about keeping me occupied while they did what? Search my apartment? Hack my personal devices? David's silence was confirmation enough. I grabbed my bag and hurried out, calling Allison as soon as I hit the sidewalk. They know, I said when she answered. David's working with Trevor. They might be at my apartment right now. Get to my office immediately, she ordered. I'll send someone to check your place. When I arrived at Allison's law firm 20 minutes later, she ushered me into a conference room where Nathan and Sarah were already waiting, looking worried. Trevor called an all-hands meeting this morning, Nathan explained. Announced a security breach that required emergency protocols. He's locked everyone out of the main servers except his direct reports. And the board meeting's been moved up to noon today, Sarah added. And relocated to the Westlake Executive Center instead of our offices. My blood ran cold. They're accelerating everything to cut us off. Allison's assistant entered with news from my apartment. 2 men had indeed been there, posing as maintenance workers. My neighbors had let them in. All my evidence was on my laptops, I said, panic rising. Not all of it, Nathan corrected, opening his bag to reveal several external hard drives. I made copies of everything yesterday, and I added something better. He grinned slightly. Full access to Trevor's private cloud storage, where he's been documenting the entire scheme for his partners. Relief flooded through me, quickly replaced by determination. We have 3 hours before the board meeting. Let's rebuild our case. We worked frantically, reconstructing the evidence and planning our approach. Without my detailed presentations, we had to rely on Nathan's copies and Allison's legal expertise to organize a compelling case. As we worked, I processed David's betrayal. I'd always treated him fairly, included him in key decisions. Yet he'd chosen personal advancement over integrity, without hesitation. Don't take it personally, Sarah advised. Seeing my expression, David's always been ambitious. Remember how he took credit for the marketing plan Lisa developed before she went on maternity leave? We finalized our strategy with barely 30 minutes to spare. The plan was for Allison to attend the meeting in her capacity as company counsel, with me arriving 15 minutes later, hopefully after Trevor had already begun his presentation. As we gathered our materials, I confronted the self-doubt that had plagued me since my firing. This is my fault, I admitted to the room. If I'd been public about owning the company from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Or they would have found another way to target us, Nathan countered. Predators like Trevor and Marcus look for any vulnerability. Your privacy wasn't the problem. Their greed was. Sarah nodded agreement. Besides, you created something amazing by focusing on the product instead of politics. How many founders can say that? Their confidence bolstered mine. As we prepared to leave, I received an urgent text from Tiffany in HR. Trevor knows you're coming. He's posted security at the building entrance with your photo. Says you're a disgruntled former employee making threats. I showed the others. He's trying to physically keep me out of the meeting. Then we need a distraction, Nathan said, already typing on his phone. And a back entrance. We quickly revised our plan. Nathan would create a diversion at the main entrance while Allison escorted me through the building's service corridor using her law firm's access credentials. As we drove to the Westlake Center, I reflected on how quickly my carefully constructed world had unraveled and how quickly I'd assembled a team willing to risk their jobs to fight back. Perhaps leadership wasn't just about who had the biggest office or the fanciest title. Perhaps it was about creating something people believed in enough to defend. We parked in the underground garage, avoiding the main entrance entirely. According to Tiffany's latest update, the board meeting had started early 11:45 instead of noon. Another attempt to conclude business before I could intervene. Ready? Allison asked as we approached the service elevator. I took a deep breath, thinking about everything at stake. Our employees' livelihoods, our customers' trust. 5 years of my life's work. Ready, I confirmed, stepping into the elevator. Let's take back my company. The service elevator opened onto a maintenance corridor dimly lit by fluorescent lights. Allison checked her phone for directions from Nathan, who had managed to obtain the building's floor plan. Executive Suite D is on the northeast corner, she whispered. We need to go through these back hallways and emerge near the restrooms. Then it's just down the main corridor. We moved quietly, listening for voices. The service areas were empty at midday, most maintenance staff on lunch breaks. The only sounds were the distant hum of HVAC systems and our own muffled footsteps. My mind raced through worst-case scenarios. What if the board had already voted? What if security stopped us before we reached the meeting? What if my evidence wasn't enough to convince them? Stop catastrophizing, Allison murmured, reading my expression. One step at a time, we reached the door leading to the main corridor and paused, listening. Allison peered through the small window. Coast is clear, she confirmed. Remember, confident and purposeful. Like we belong here. We emerged near the restrooms as planned and walked briskly towards Suite D. Through the glass wall beside the entrance, I could see the meeting in progress. Trevor stood at the head of the table, gesturing at a presentation displaying financial projections. The board members, 8 men and 2 women, watched with varying expressions of concern and confusion. Marcus sat to Trevor's right, occasionally nodding supportively. David was there too, I noted with a fresh surge of anger, positioned like Trevor's right-hand man. The betrayal still stung. Ready? Allison asked, hand on the door handle. I nodded, squaring my shoulders. 5 years building in the shadows had taught me to avoid confrontation, to solve problems quietly with code rather than conflict. But today demanded a different approach. Today required me to step into the light. The moment we entered, Trevor faltered mid-sentence. His expression shifted from surprise to barely concealed panic when he recognized me. Excuse me, he recovered quickly. This is a private meeting. Security. Jonathan Peters, our board chairman, looked confused. Jaclyn, what are you doing here? Trevor informed us you were terminated last week. I was, I confirmed, moving toward the table as Allison closed the door behind us. But there's something Trevor forgot to mention during that termination meeting. I own 70% of Horizon Tech. The room erupted in confused exclamations. Trevor attempted to regain control, his voice rising above the others. This is absurd. She's a disgruntled former employee making outlandish claims. Security should remove her immediately. Actually, Allison interjected smoothly, placing a folder on the table. These are the original incorporation documents and share certificates. Jaclyn is indeed the majority shareholder and founder of Horizon Tech. Jonathan opened the folder, examining the documents with increasing bewilderment. I don't understand. Patrick was introduced to us as the founder. Patrick was the public face, I explained. I preferred to focus on product development rather than external relations. The arrangement worked well until recently. Marcus leaned forward, his expression calculating. Even if this were true, which I'm not conceding, it doesn't change today's agenda. The company faces serious financial challenges requiring immediate action. Those financial challenges are artificially created, I countered, nodding to Allison, who distributed more documents. These are the actual financial records compared to the modified versions presented to the board over the past 3 months. As the board members reviewed the evidence, Trevor's face flushed with anger. This is corporate espionage. She accessed company systems after termination. That's a federal offense, accessing systems I built, using protocols approved by this board, to uncover fraud being committed against my own company. I raised an eyebrow. I don't think that argument will hold up in court. David chose this moment to intervene. Trevor's right. Jaclyn has been obsessed with maintaining control. She's undermined leadership repeatedly. These accusations are just another attempt to sabotage the company's progress. I hadn't expected David's betrayal to hurt afresh, but it did. We'd worked closely for 3 years. He'd been at my home for team dinners, celebrated product launches with champagne toasts praising my vision. "Is that why you met with me this morning under false pretenses?" I asked him directly. "To stall while Trevor's men searched my apartment for evidence? Was that for the company's progress too?" David had the decency to look uncomfortable as several board members turned to him questioningly. Trevor attempted to regain control. "We're getting sidetracked by irrelevant accusations. The offer from Vortex expires at 3 p.m. today. We need to vote now." "Before you do," I said, pulling out the final piece of evidence, Nathan's flash drive, "you should see what wasn't included in Trevor's presentation. The real plans for Horizon after acquisition." Jonathan gestured to his assistant, who connected the drive to the room's projection system. The screen filled with documents. The true patent valuation at $380 million. Trevor's private communications with Vortex, outlining the planned dismantling of the company. The kickback agreements, paying Trevor and Marcus millions for facilitating the sale. The board members' expressions transformed from confusion to shock to anger as they absorbed the evidence. Marcus and Trevor exchanged panicked glances. David stared at the table, avoiding eye contact with anyone. "These documents appear to have been obtained illegally," Marcus attempted, but his voice lacked conviction. Jonathan silenced him with a raised hand. "These documents appear to show conspiracy to defraud shareholders and breach of fiduciary duty, at minimum." He turned to me. "Jaclyn, why reveal your ownership now? Why operate in the shadows all these years?" It was the question I'd been asking myself since Friday. My answer would determine not just the outcome of this meeting, but the future of the company I'd built. I believed the best innovation happens when people focus on creating rather than politics. I began slowly. I wanted Horizon's products to succeed because they were excellent, not because of who founded the company. That approach built an amazing team and breakthrough technology. I paused, acknowledging my mistake. But I was wrong about one thing. Leadership isn't just about having great ideas. It's about protecting the culture that makes those ideas possible. By staying in the background, I created a vacuum that people like Trevor could exploit. Looking directly at Trevor, I continued, "I won't make that mistake again." As majority shareholder, I moved to terminate Trevor Blackwell's employment effective immediately, reject the Vortex acquisition offer, and launch an independent investigation into the actions of all involved parties. Jonathan looked around the table. "Do I have a second for this motion?" After a moment of tense silence, Amanda Wilson, our longest-serving board member, spoke up. "I second the motion, and I'd like to add that I've had my own concerns about Trevor's leadership. Several key engineers threatened to resign last month, citing hostile work environment. I raised this with Trevor directly, but was assured it was being handled." Trevor's face contorted with rage. "This is a coordinated attack. You can't seriously be considering throwing away a guaranteed acquisition based on fabricated evidence." "The evidence isn't fabricated," came a new voice from the doorway. We all turned to see Nathan entering, tablet in hand. "Trevor, you really should use stronger passwords than your dog's name and birth year. I've been monitoring your private cloud storage for days, including the recordings of your meetings with Marcus planning this whole scheme." Trevor lunged for Nathan's tablet, but 2 board members moved to block him. "I think we've seen enough," Jonathan said grimly. "All in favor of Jaclyn's motion?" 8 hands raised immediately. The remaining 2 board members, Marcus and his appointed colleague, knew they were outvoted and reluctantly abstained rather than oppose the majority. "Motion passes," Jonathan declared. "Trevor, please surrender any company property and leave the premises immediately. Marcus, the board will be reviewing your involvement separately." Trevor's face was a mask of cold fury. You have no idea what you've done. This isn't over. Actually, it is, I replied calmly. The FBI has already been contacted regarding the wire fraud and intellectual property theft. Agents are probably waiting for you downstairs. This was a bluff. Allison had only filed preliminary reports, but the color draining from Trevor's face suggested it hit the mark. Without another word, he stormed out, Marcus following close behind. As the door closed behind them, the room erupted in questions. Board members wanted details about my background, the company's actual financial position, what had really been happening under Trevor's leadership. For the next hour, I answered honestly, filling in the gaps of Horizon's true history and my role in building it. With each explanation, I felt a weight lifting the burden of secrecy I'd carried for years. So what happens now? Jonathan asked. When the initial flurry of questions subsided, I looked around the table at these people who had been making decisions about my company without knowing its true creator. Some had been unwitting participants in Trevor's scheme. Others had sensed something wrong but lacked the full picture to act. Now, I said with newfound certainty, we rebuild. Transparently, collaboratively, and with integrity as our foundation. As the meeting adjourned, board members approached individually to express support or apologize for not recognizing Trevor's deception sooner. David attempted to approach, but I turned away. Some betrayals couldn't be explained away in a moment. Outside the meeting room, Nathan, Sarah, and Tiffany waited anxiously. When I emerged with Allison, their faces broke into relieved smiles at my thumbs up. What happened? Sarah asked eagerly. We won the battle, I told them. But the war for Horizon's future starts tomorrow. As we walked together toward the elevator, I realized something profound had shifted within me. For years, I'd defined success as creating brilliant technology while remaining personally in the background. Now I understood that true leadership sometimes meant stepping into the spotlight not for ego or recognition, but to protect what matters. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Rebuilding trust with employees, repairing customer relationships damaged during Trevor's tenure, legal proceedings against those who'd attempted to steal the company. But for tonight, I allowed myself to feel the simple satisfaction of reclaiming what was mine. As we reached the lobby, Nathan's phone pinged with a news alert. Trevor's just been detained by security, he reported with a grim smile. Apparently, he tried to access the server room on his way out. Destroying evidence? Allison guessed. Nathan nodded. Too late. We've got it all backed up in 3 separate locations. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. I paused, looking back at the building where I'd just fought the most important battle of my career. You know, I said to my small team of allies, I think it's time we all went back to work. Our real work, Sarah laughed. Does this mean we're getting our jobs back? Better, I promised. We're getting our company back. I arrived at Horizon's headquarters by 7 the next morning. News of yesterday's dramatic board meeting had spread rapidly through the company. Despite there being no official announcement, the lobby buzzed with nervous energy as employees exchanged theories and rumors. The security guard at the front desk did a double take when he saw me. Miss Winters, I thought. My access was mistakenly deactivated, I said with newfound confidence. Could you please issue a temporary badge until the system's updated? 10 minutes later, I stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor. David stood outside what had been Trevor's office, looking uncertain. When he saw me, he straightened, attempting a conciliatory smile. Jaclyn, I want to explain about yesterday. I cut him off with a raised hand. Not now, David. We have an all-hands meeting in 20 minutes. Your presence is required, but not your input. His smile faltered. You have to understand my position, Trevor said. Trevor lied. You chose to believe him because it benefited you. That's a choice you'll have to live with. I moved past him toward the conference room where Allison waited with Jonathan and 2 other board members. The rest of the board will join virtually, Jonathan explained as I entered. We've drafted a formal statement announcing Trevor and Marcus's departure and your appointment as CEO, pending your acceptance. I took the document he offered, scanning its contents. The language was straightforward, acknowledging my founding role and majority ownership, while tactfully describing recent leadership transitions. There's also the matter of the acquisition offer, Allison added. We've formally rejected Vortex's proposal, but their lawyers are already claiming binding verbal commitments were made. Let them try, I said. Trevor had no authority to make binding commitments without board approval, especially considering his undisclosed conflicts of interest. Jonathan nodded approval. That's our position as well. Now, about your role going forward. For the next 15 minutes, we finalized the announcement and my transition from behind-the-scenes founder to public CEO. At 7:30 sharp, we headed to the main auditorium where the entire company, nearly 50 employees, had gathered. The room fell silent as I walked to the podium. Most faces showed confusion or cautious curiosity. A few, those who had known me from the beginning, displayed barely contained excitement. Good morning, I began. My name is Jaclyn Winters. Many of you know me as the head of product development. Today, I need to introduce myself properly. I'm the founder and majority owner of Horizon Tech. The auditorium erupted in surprised murmurs. I waited for the noise to subside before continuing. 5 years ago, I created this company with a vision of building the most secure, innovative cloud storage platform on the market. I chose to focus on product development rather than public leadership, a decision that had both benefits and consequences. I explained the events of the past week in simple, transparent terms. Trevor's attempted corporate theft, the board's decision to remove him, and the rejection of the Vortex acquisition. Yesterday's board meeting marked a turning point for Horizon, I continued. Not just in leadership, but in transparency. Moving forward, we'll rebuild based on the values that made us successful. Innovation, integrity, and respect for every individual's contribution. I announced immediate changes. All recent terminations would be reviewed, the restructuring plan canceled, and normal operations resumed under temporary department leadership, while we reorganized thoughtfully rather than reactively. I understand this creates uncertainty, I acknowledged. Some of you may have concerns about working for a founder-led company after expecting to join Vortex. Others may question my qualifications to serve as CEO after years focused on product. These are valid questions that I'm committed to addressing through actions, not just words. As the formal portion of the meeting concluded, I opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up across the auditorium. For the next hour, I answered candidly, admitting what I didn't know while confidently asserting my vision for the company's future. When Sarah asked about the financial implications of rejecting the acquisition, I was honest about the challenges ahead. Trevor damaged some client relationships and financial projections during his tenure, I explained. Rebuilding will take time and collective effort, but our core technology remains industry-leading, and our team, the people in this room, are our greatest asset. As the meeting dispersed, employees approached individually with questions, concerns, or simply to introduce themselves properly to their founder. The atmosphere transformed from anxious uncertainty to cautious optimism. Nathan pulled me aside as the crowd thinned. Security just called. Trevor tried to enter the building, claiming he'd forgotten personal items. They turned him away as instructed. He'll try other approaches, I warned. We need to secure all systems immediately. We spent the next several hours in marathon meetings, implementing new security protocols, contacting key clients to explain the leadership change, reviewing Trevor's decisions to identify what needed immediate reversal. By late afternoon, Allison arrived with both good news and bad. The good news: the FBI has opened a formal investigation into Trevor and Marcus based on our evidence, she reported. The bad news: Vortex is filing suit claiming breach of contract and Trevor's lawyer is threatening defamation charges. I sighed, rubbing tired eyes. As expected. How vulnerable are we? Legally, their position is weak. Trevor clearly exceeded his authority and violated fiduciary duties. But they can drag this out, create bad press, try to spook investors and clients. Just then, my phone buzzed with an alert from our monitoring system. Someone was attempting to access our client database using Trevor's credentials, which should have been deactivated. "Nathan!" I called, already moving toward the door. "Server room, now!" We raced down 3 flights of stairs to the secure server facility. Inside, we found 2 IT staff frantically working at terminals. "What's happening?" I demanded. "Massive data extraction attempt," one explained without looking up. "Someone's trying to download our entire client list and project database using admin credentials." "Trevor's credentials should be disabled," Nathan said. "They are," the technician confirmed. "They're using a backdoor account created 2 weeks ago. Username, TB Consulting, with full system privileges." I recognized Trevor's planning immediately. He'd created an emergency access point for himself before executing his plan. "Shut it down," I ordered. "Kill all external access temporarily if you have to." For the next 30 minutes, we worked to contain the breach while tracing its origin. The attack came from an IP address associated with Vortex Industries, direct evidence of their involvement in corporate espionage. "Document everything," I instructed the team. This just strengthened our legal position considerably. That evening, the executive team, those who remained after Trevor's purge, gathered in the conference room to assess our situation. The mood was tense but determined. "They'll keep coming," our finance director warned. "Vortex has 10 times our resources and they're not used to losing." "Neither am I," I replied simply. As we strategized late into the night, I realized how completely my role had transformed in just 7 days. From hidden founder to public defender of the company I'd built. From technical expert to battle commander. Around midnight, Jonathan called with unexpected news. The board received a letter from Vortex's CEO directly. They're withdrawing the acquisition offer and dropping all legal claims. "Why the sudden retreat?" I asked, suspicious. Apparently, their general counsel reviewed the evidence of Trevor's activities and advised them they were potentially implicated in criminal conduct. They're distancing themselves completely, claiming Trevor misrepresented his authority and their intentions. I laughed without humor. They're throwing him under the bus to save themselves. Essentially, this doesn't end all our challenges, but it removes the immediate threat. After hanging up, I walked to the window, overlooking downtown Austin. Lights twinkled in buildings where other companies conducted their business, without the drama we'd just experienced. For a moment, I envied their normalcy. But as I turned back to the conference room where my team still worked diligently, I felt something unexpected. Pride. Not just in the company I'd built or the technology we'd created, but in these people who'd fought alongside me when everything was at risk. "I have news," I announced, rejoining them. Everyone looked up expectantly, exhaustion evident on their faces. Vortex has withdrawn completely. The acquisition threat is over. Tired cheers filled the room. The first moment of uncomplicated victory we'd experienced. "There's more work ahead," I cautioned, after the celebration subsided. "But tonight, everyone go home. Rest. Tomorrow we start rebuilding Horizon the right way." As they gathered their things, Sarah approached hesitantly. "I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're not just the head of product anymore. You're a good leader, Jaclyn. The company needs that now." Her words stayed with me as I finally headed home in the early morning hours. 5 years ago, I'd chosen to lead from behind the scenes, believing that great products were enough. Now I understood that leadership sometimes required stepping into the spotlight, not for personal glory, but as an act of protection and responsibility towards something larger than myself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Rebuilding trust with clients, restructuring departments damaged by Trevor's brief reign, legal proceedings against those who'd attempted to steal what we'd built. But for tonight, driving through the quiet streets toward home, I allowed myself to feel the simple satisfaction of victory. We had survived the first battle. The war for Horizon's future was just beginning. 6 months after the dramatic board meeting that exposed Trevor's scheme, I stood at the podium in the same auditorium, addressing a much different audience. Our company had grown to 70 employees. The room buzzed with positive energy as people took their seats for our quarterly all-hands meeting. "Good morning, Horizon." I began with a smile that came naturally now. Before we review our impressive quarterly results, I want to acknowledge how far we've come together. The journey hadn't been easy. After Trevor and Marcus's removal, we faced significant challenges. 3 major clients, confused by the leadership changes, had initially threatened to leave. Our stock value had temporarily dropped as news of the attempted corporate theft became public. Trevor and Marcus, despite mounting legal troubles, had attempted to spread damaging rumors within the industry. 6 months ago, industry analysts predicted we wouldn't survive the transition. I reminded everyone. Today, our market share has increased by 22%. Our new security platform has been recognized as the industry standard. And most importantly, we've built a company culture based on transparency and shared purpose. The transformation had required difficult decisions. David was among several executives who eventually left, unable to adapt to our new emphasis on collaborative leadership rather than top-down authority. We'd restructured departments based on expertise rather than politics, often promoting from within rather than bringing in outside professional management. Our financial results tell part of the story, I continued, as the screen behind me displayed our quarterly performance. Revenue had increased 34% compared to the previous year. Customer retention had improved from 87% to 96%. Our staff turnover rate had dropped to half the industry average. Sarah, now our Chief Financial Officer, took over to present detailed financial results. As she spoke confidently about our strengthened position, I reflected on individual journeys. Sarah had been an underutilized accounting manager under Trevor's regime. Given opportunity and support, she'd blossomed into an exceptional executive with unique insight into our business model. Nathan followed with updates on product development. His new role as Chief Technology Officer, recognizing years of brilliant but previously underappreciated work. Tiffany presented our revamped human resources approach, emphasizing professional development and work-life balance. When I returned to the podium for closing remarks, I shared news we'd been anticipating for weeks. Yesterday, the federal investigation into Trevor Blackwell and Marcus Whitfield concluded with both men accepting plea agreements. They've acknowledged their roles in attempting to defraud our company and shareholders. While this officially closes a difficult chapter in our history, it also validates the stand we took together to protect what we've built. Applause erupted, not celebratory but resolute acknowledgement of collective victory against those who had attempted to destroy what we valued. This outcome wasn't inevitable, I continued when the room quieted. It happened because individuals at every level of this company chose integrity over expediency, long-term vision over short-term gain. You reported suspicious activities, preserved critical evidence, maintained client relationships during uncertainty, and ultimately rebuilt something stronger than what existed before. After the meeting, I walked through different departments, connecting with teams working on various projects. This had become my regular practice, balancing strategic leadership with staying connected to our core work. Unlike before, I no longer hid my founder status or authority, but I maintained my hands-on involvement with product development. In the afternoon, Allison joined me for our standing monthly legal update. As company counsel, she'd skillfully guided us through regulatory challenges and strengthened our governance structures. The board restructuring is complete, she reported as we settled in my office. No longer the imposing space Trevor had created, but a comfortable, functional room with glass walls symbolizing transparency. With the new independent directors, we've achieved the balance of expertise and oversight you wanted. And the employee ownership program? I asked. This initiative had been particularly important to me, creating opportunities for staff to share in the company's success. Launching next quarter as planned. 20% of company shares allocated to the employee pool. Vesting over 4 years. I nodded, satisfied. While maintaining majority control, I'd committed to sharing ownership with those who contributed to our success. There's one other thing, Allison added, looking somewhat hesitant. Vortex Industries is being acquired. Their aggressive acquisition strategy backfired, and their stock has plummeted. Industry rumors suggest their failed attempt to acquire us was the beginning of their downfall. I considered this news thoughtfully. Poetic justice, I suppose, but not our concern anymore. Speaking of justice, Allison continued, the team that stood by you during the crisis, Nathan, Sarah, Tiffany, and the others, they've organized something for after work today. A small celebration marking 6 months since the revolution, as they're calling it. That evening, we gathered at a local restaurant that had become our unofficial company spot for celebrations. The core team who had helped save Horizon raised glasses in a toast. To Jaclyn, Nathan proposed, who taught us that leadership isn't about titles or corner offices, it's about standing up for what you've built. To all of us, I corrected gently, for proving that how you win matters as much as winning itself. As conversation flowed around me, I reflected on the transformation of the past 6 months, not just in the company, but in myself. I'd entered the business world believing I could separate creation from leadership, that I could build something meaningful while remaining in the background. Experience had taught me a more nuanced truth. Effective leadership wasn't about ego or control, but about creating conditions where collective talent could flourish. The following morning, I arrived early to prepare for an important client meeting. Passing the wall where company milestones were displayed, I paused at a new addition. A framed copy of the original incorporation document showing my signature as founder, alongside a photo of our current team. Below it, an engraved plaque read, Horizon Tech, founded in innovation, forged in integrity. Jonathan appeared beside me, observing my contemplation of the display. Your idea to put this up was perfect, he commented. It reminds everyone that history matters, but so does how we write the next chapters. Speaking of next chapters, I replied, the board approved our expansion plan yesterday. We're opening the Seattle office next quarter. He smiled knowingly. From nearly losing everything to expanding operations in 6 months. Not bad for someone who once thought she wasn't cut out for leadership. As we walked toward the conference room, employees greeted us with the casual confidence of people who felt ownership in their workplace. The culture had shifted from the fear-based environment Trevor had created to one of collaborative innovation where ideas were valued regardless of who proposed them. The day's client meeting exemplified our new approach. Rather than executives making presentations while technical staff remained silent, Trevor's preferred method, we engaged in open discussion where everyone contributed expertise. The potential client, initially skeptical about working with a company that had recently experienced such dramatic changes, left impressed by both our technology and our transparent culture. That afternoon, I spent time in the product development lab, reviewing progress on our next-generation security protocol. Despite my expanded responsibilities as CEO, I maintained regular involvement in technical development, not micromanaging, but contributing where my expertise added value. As day turned to evening, I completed one final task before heading home, recording a short video for our updated website. The marketing team had suggested replacing the generic corporate messaging with a more personal founder's statement. Looking directly into the camera, I spoke from the heart. At Horizon, We believe technology should serve people, not the other way around. Our success is measured not just in profits or market share, but in creating tools that enhance security, privacy, and productivity for our users. As founder and CEO, I'm committed to building a company where innovation thrives through collaboration, where integrity guides every decision, and where we never forget that our purpose extends beyond quarterly results to the lasting impact of our work. As I reviewed the recording, I realized how completely my perspective had evolved. 5 years ago, I'd believed I could separate my creation from my identity, that I could build something meaningful while remaining personally invisible. Now I understood that authentic leadership wasn't about choosing between innovation and visibility. It was about aligning them in service of something larger than oneself. The next morning brought news that our company valuation had reached $500 million, far exceeding the $40 million Trevor had attempted to sell us for. While gratifying, the number itself seemed less important than what it represented. Validation of our approach to building technology and organization based on substance rather than appearance. In my office, I found a small gift box with a note from the original crisis team, Nathan, Sarah, Allison, and Tiffany. Inside was a custom nameplate for my desk that read simply, Jaclyn Winters, founder and CEO. The journey from secretly owning my company to publicly leading it had transformed not just my professional identity but my understanding of what it meant to create something meaningful in the world. True ownership wasn't just about legal documents and stock certificates. It was about standing visibly behind what you build, taking responsibility for its impact, and creating space for others to contribute their best work. As I placed the nameplate on my desk, I smiled at the simplicity of the lesson it represented. Some things are worth claiming publicly, worth fighting for openly. The company I'd built was one of them. Have you ever had to stand up and claim something that was rightfully yours, even when it was uncomfortable? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of reclaiming what belongs to you resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about finding your voice and standing your ground. Don't forget to share with someone who might need encouragement to step into the spotlight when necessary. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply to sign your name to what you've created.